Hello and welcome to our morning edition of Arirang News. We begin with these stories making the headlines at this hour. The U.S. Supreme Court began hearing arguments over the legality of President Donald Trump's sweeping tariffs on South Korea and other trading partners. A majority of the top court justices reportedly appear skeptical about the president's power to impose such far-reaching tariffs. South Korea and the United States are expected to announce a joint fact sheet as early as this week that will cover tariffs and security issues. The two sides are in final consultations after reaching a trade deal last week, following months of tariff negotiations. Following another round of U.S. sanctions on North Korea, Pyongyang said it will respond with strategic patience to what it called Washington's unchanged hostility. We begin this morning with the U.S. Supreme Court, which began its hearings on whether President Donald Trump's decision to impose sweeping tariffs was legal. Justices of the top court, which hold a conservative majority, seem skeptical of the president's power to unilaterally impose tariffs. But legal experts say the outcome of this case remains uncertain. Our Lee Seung-jae starts us off.
The U.S. Supreme Court began hearings on Wednesday to decide whether President Donald Trump's sweeping tariffs on South Korea and other nations were legally justified. At the center of the case is whether Trump exceeded his presidential authority when he used tariffs as a central tool of his economic and foreign policy.
The power to impose tariffs is a core application of the power to regulate foreign commerce, which is what the phrase regulate importation in IEEPA naturally evokes.
Justices met at the Supreme Court building in Washington, D.C. to hear arguments from attorneys representing small businesses and 12 Democratic-leaning states that filed the lawsuit, as well as from government lawyers defending Trump's policy.
It's simply implausible that in enacting IEEPA, Congress handed the president the power to overhaul the entire tariff system and the American economy in the process, allowing him to set and reset tariffs on any and every product from any and every country at any and all times.
Lower courts, including the U.S. Court of International Trade and the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals, had already ruled that Trump's global tariffs imposed using emergency powers were unlawful. The Supreme Court, now holding a 6-3 conservative majority, has in the past issued rulings favorable to Trump, but legal experts say the outcome of this case remains uncertain. The central issue is whether Trump's reliance on the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, which allows a president to regulate imports in response to a declared national emergency, provided a legitimate legal basis for his tariffs. On April 2nd, Trump declared an emergency, claiming that America's chronic trade deficits were a threat to national security and the economy. He then announced plans to impose so-called reciprocal tariffs on multiple foreign nations. During Wednesday's session, a majority of the justices appeared skeptical about the president's power to unilaterally impose such far-reaching tariffs. 3 conservative justices raised concerns about whether an emergency law could give Trump near limitless power to change import duties and affect global trade. The court's 3 liberal justices also voiced doubts, meaning that at least 2 conservative votes could move to limit Trump's authority, though not necessarily strike it down completely. Legal analysts say the decision in this case could redefine the scope of presidential authority in trade policy for years to come. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
So as we just heard, the Trump administration's tariffs now face the U.S. Supreme Court. For more on what's at stake and its economic impact, we're joined today by Professor Kwak Jun-hee, Assistant Professor of Economics at Seogang University. Professor Kwak, thanks for joining us this morning.
Yeah, good morning. Thank you for having me.
So it could take weeks or even months until we get a final ruling. But what happens if the Supreme Court rules against the Trump administration? How might this affect South Korea and the global economy?
Right. So the case centers on whether the president can use the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, in short IEEPA, to impose broad tariffs without explicit congressional approval. And now it seems the U.S. Supreme Court is skeptical about this, but we don't know the decision yet. So first, if the court rules they are against the tariffs, I think this would be a major relief for the South Korean economy. Because as you know, for example, steel industry, we are facing like 50% of tariff. That's a great hit to the steel industry in Korea. And then with the lower tariffs, we expect our product can be more price competitive in the US market. So we can boost our export after this decision. So I really hope the Supreme Court will have a very right decision. But if it has some court rules in favor of the tariffs, I think this would create significant trade policy uncertainty, and we will see much more muted trade across the world. And at the end, that will hit the Korean industries as well.
Right, we'll have to see until the final ruling comes out. But meanwhile, South Korea reached a trade deal with the United States while Donald Trump was in Gyeonggi last week, and that includes a $200 billion cash investment in the United States in exchange for lower tariffs. Would you say this was a fair deal?
Yeah, first of all, the cash investment itself is, I think it's difficult to say it's a fair deal, but I can say it's now we have a better deal, okay, compared to the last one. The problem is, as you know, total amount of investment that will account for most of the foreign reserve in Korea, which poses a threat to stability in the Korean foreign exchange market. But now we have a better deal. So only $200 billion can be financed by cash. So it's much better than we should pay everything in cash. Moreover, now we can pay those $200 billion in 10 years separately. I think now that's doable. And moreover, I think it critically depends on details on the final agreement. For example, it matters how we are going to share the return from investment between the US and Korea. And also, I think it's important to think about the total amount of expected return from the investment. If we have better scenario, I think it's not that it would be fair agreement, I guess. Yeah.
I see. But despite that trade deal, like you just earlier mentioned, there are concerns that the steel industry still face tariffs of 50%. What's your take on this? What should be done for Korean companies to, get more advantage when entering the U.S. market?
Yeah, so the trade deal negotiated during the APEC meeting in Gyeonggi was a success for some sectors like automobiles, where tariffs were lowered from 25% to 15%. But the problem is this explicitly excludes the steel industry. So my take is that steel industry is facing a separate and more severe challenge. First of all, this tariff on steel industry depends on different legal basis. So it's based on the Section 232 of the Trade Expansion Act. And that's rationalized by the national security issue of the U.S. So I think it's a little bit more difficult to reach an agreement on this. Moreover, it's about U.S. politics. And the main reason why Trump administration imposes higher tariffs was to revive their manufacturing sector and create jobs for American people. And they also really want to protect their domestic steel industry, and that's vital for their Rust Belt political base. So thinking about their election, I think they are not likely to concede in this agreement with regard to the steel industry. So moreover, this 50% tariff on steel industry, if it's not lowered, then I think it has significant impacts because it can be also applied to, it is applied to over 400 derivative products like home appliances and transformers. And that will also hit not only POSCO or Hyundai Steel, but also the medium-sized Korean exporters. So we are in a very bad situation.
I see, that sounds pretty concerning. And as for the domestic economy, Korean stocks sharply fell after hitting multiple record highs in recent weeks, and this triggered a sidecar yesterday. For the first time in 7 months, the stocks went up again a little this morning, but what's behind the sudden decline?
Yeah, first of all, we know that there was a lot of concern about the AI bubbles in the US. So, for example, that there was an announcement of Palantir, that's US data analytics company, although they achieved very strong earnings. Now we observe a decline in stock index, including Palantir and AI-related stocks. What we know as an economist is there is always an optimistic investors, and that derive stock booms, and that's what we have actually observed in early 2000 as well. There was an IT bubble. So, and moreover, we see that Mike Burry, who is the hedge fund manager, who also placed the put options on Palantir, and I think that created corrections. But what I want to say is it was predicted corrections. After persistent booms, it's inevitable to get some corrections. And after the significant rally, the institutional and foreign investors, they want to get some profits, okay? So I think I expect they will get some profits now, and maybe the stock will rebound again after this correction.
I see. We'll have to see how that goes. All right, Professor Kwok, thank you so much for your time and insight today. We appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you so much. Bye-bye.
In other news, Seoul and Washington are currently in close consultations to announce a joint fact sheet soon, possibly as early as this week following their recent trade deal. But the devil, as always, looks to be in the details. Our top office correspondent Yoon Jung-min reports.
Following an unexpected trade deal as a result of last week's talks between Presidents Lee Jae-myung and Donald Trump, the South Korean and U.S. authorities are discussing the details of the joint fact sheet and MOUs that are to be announced within a few days.
The two countries do not have many differences, so the fact sheet is expected to be concluded this week.
The Trump administration plans to lower its tariffs on Korea in exchange for the latter's investment package, worth hundreds of billions of dollars. Sources say the details entail setting from when the tariffs will drop retroactively, with Seoul hoping to move up the date to August 7th, the point where America's tariffs began taking effect, while Washington reportedly says otherwise. South Korea has also reportedly asked the U.S. to specify its tariff cut in a Federal Register notice upon signing the MOU. The allies agreed upon a framework deal in July, but Korea is still subject to higher levies, including sectoral duties on cars. On the security front, consultations are in the works to include the allies' cooperation on nuclear power submarines in the fact sheet, as discussed at the highest level last week. Some have raised the possibility that the sheet could include Korea's commitment to purchase U.S. weaponry worth $25 billion, to which Seoul's presidential office responded that nothing has been decided and any decision will be made taking into account various conditions. The gist of the Korea-U.S. trade deal includes Seoul making investments worth $350 billion, among which $200 billion will be in cash, with an annual payment ceiling of $20 billion, while $150 billion will be invested for cooperation on shipbuilding. Yoon Jung-min, Arirang News.
And shifting gears, following another round of U.S. sanctions on North Korea this week, Pyongyang released a statement saying that the regime will wait out Washington rather than engage under current conditions. Our An Seung-jin has the details.
North Korea said it will respond with strategic patience to what it calls Washington's unchanged hostility following the recent sanctions. According to its state media Korean Central News Agency on Thursday, Kim Woosung, Vice Minister of Foreign Affairs in charge of U.S. affairs, issued a statement that reiterated Pyongyang's position against what it called the deep-rooted hostility toward our state from the current U.S. administration. Kim added that the latest round of sanctions is the fifth unilateral sanctions package since the Trump administration took office, and denounced the U.S. for asserting pressure and coercion, which will have no impact on the North's position toward Washington. This comes as the U.S. Treasury Department announced this week new sanctions on individuals and institutions allegedly involved in laundering illicit funds from cybercrime operations to fund the North's weapons program. The State Department had also stated that it plans to pursue UN sanctions against foreign ships accused of helping transport North Korean coal and iron ore exports to China. Despite Trump's interest in reviving talks with Kim Jong-un, as the sanctions continue, Pyongyang's choice of strategic patience may suggest a sharp rhetoric and a renewed hardline approach. On the U.S. perspective, analysts say that the latest sanctions may signal stronger pressure on the regime after U.S.-North Korea talks failed to materialize during Trump's recent visit to Asia. An Seung-jin, Arirang News.
Meanwhile, the United States test-fired a Minuteman III intercontinental ballistic missile from Vandenberg Space Force Base in California early Wednesday, just days after President Donald Trump urged a restart of nuclear weapons testing. The Air Force Global Strike Command confirmed the unmanned, unarmed GT-254 missile launch went smoothly, with the rocket landing near the Ronald Reagan Ballistic Missile Defense Site in the Marshall Islands. Officials said the test had been planned months in advance. The Minuteman III is a key component of America's nuclear triad, alongside submarine and bomber-launched nuclear weapons, designed to respond only in the event of a nuclear attack. And here in South Korea, the country's current account surplus continued for the 29th month straight in September, driven by strong exports. The Bank of Korea announced today that the preliminary current account surplus registered for the month stood at $13.47 billion, the largest for any previous September. According to officials, the figure was driven by a $14.24 billion surplus in the goods account. Exports rose 9.6% from the previous year, while imports increased by 4.5%. Also, from January to September, the cumulative surplus reached $82.77 billion, about 23% higher than the same period last year. Meanwhile, Arirang TV's video journalist Kim Woosung received the award for news at the 2025 Hinzpeter Awards in Seoul on Wednesday for his report Midnight Martial Law. He accepted the honor with 3 other people on behalf of 48 fellow journalists for covering the tense developments at the National Assembly following former President Yoon Suk-yeol's martial law declaration last year, despite the risks posed by troops surrounding the area. Established in 2021, the Hinzpeter Awards commemorate German journalist Wilhelm Hinzpeter, who broke the story of the Gwangju democratization movement in May 1980. Meanwhile, one of the largest public libraries is open on a trial basis with green initiatives and AI-based activities. Our Cha In-kyung tells us more.
This is a newly built Gyeonggi Provincial Library in Gyeonggi Convergence Town. It covers an area of about 27,000 square meters and has 5 floors above ground and 4 below, making it the largest public library in the country, excluding the National Library. Since it is operated as a climate and environment library, the 1st and 4th floors feature specialized spaces for material on those topics. The use of disposable products is also kept to a minimum.
We're trying to minimize many of the items we've been using, such as papers used for information boards, book location printouts, and other disposable products.
On the second floor, there is a World Friends Book Village designed for children and families. It offers multilingual material from 22 countries, ranging from English to Vietnamese. There is also a service where AI learns family members' voices and reads books to children. On the first basement level, there is an AI studio where visitors can use 8 types of generative AI tool for free. The library features a spiral structure with no walls or doors, and each floor includes various hands-on and experimental spaces, making it a unique environment. Its opening hours are 10 a.m. to 9 p.m. from Tuesday to Friday and 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. on Saturdays and Sundays. The library will be operated on a trial basis until the end of the year and will officially begin full operation next year. 차윤경, Arirang News.
Good morning. I'm Chu Ji-hyun, and this is The World Now. In New York City on Tuesday night, Democrat Zohran Mamdani won a decisive victory over former governor of New York State Andrew Cuomo to become the city's first Muslim mayor. With 97% of the votes counted, he led by more than 8 points. Speaking in Brooklyn, Mamdani called New York, quote, light in a moment of political darkness, and sent a direct message to President, turn the volume up. Within minutes, Donald Trump fired back on Truth Social, branding Mamdani's victory, quote, communism over common sense, and warning that Democrats are pushing America too far left. The win cements a strong night for Democrats nationwide. Mamdani will take office in January as New York's 111th mayor. Focus now turns to how his progressive agenda, including rent freezes and an increase in corporation tax, will unfold under Trump presidency. In the United States, at least 11 people were killed when a plane crashed and exploded on Tuesday evening in Louisville, Kentucky. Authorities say the UPS cargo plane's left engine caught fire and detached during takeoff from Louisville Muhammad Ali International Airport, sending the plane crashing into nearby buildings and triggering a massive fireball. According to officials, at least a dozen of people were injured, and more victims were feared as the search continues for missing people. Officials also say the crash caused a blaze so intense that parts of the city were briefly placed under a shelter-in-place order. Investigators have recovered the plane's black boxes and are examining footage showing the engine falling from the wing moments before impact to determine what caused one of the state's deadliest aviation disasters. In Bosnia-Herzegovina, at least 11 people have been killed and around 30 injured after a fire broke out at a retirement home in the city of Tuzla, about 80 kilometers northeast of Sarajevo on Tuesday evening. Authorities say the blaze started on the 7th floor of the building and took an hour to bring under control. Local media report that many of the victims were elderly or bedridden, unable to escape as flames and smoke filled the upper floors. Officials are investigating the cause, and the home's director has offered his resignation, calling the tragedy, quote, a heartbreak for the entire country. The brightest supermoon of 2025 illuminated skies around the world on November 5th. Also known as the Beaver Moon, the spectacle appeared up to 14% larger and 30% brighter than usual, bright enough to cast shadows under its light. Astronomers say the moon reached its closest point to Earth, about 357,000 kilometers away, just hours after turning full, marking the biggest and brightest of the 3 moons that appeared this year. Skywatchers in both hemispheres enjoyed the show, while a live stream from Italy's virtual telescope project captured the moment for millions online. The next supermoon is set to rise on Thursday, December the 4th.
After a foggy start, we are having another mild and gentle autumn day across the country. But with the air staying still, ultrafine dust will build up, especially across the central and western parts of Korea. Air quality will be bad all day in the capital area, Chungcheongdo and Jeollabuk-do provinces. So if you're sensitive to dust, it's a good day to wear a mask outdoors. And many are coming down with a cold these days due to big temperature fluctuations. So please keep that scarf close. Wide temperature swings from morning to daytime will persist throughout the month. And most regions will have comfortable temperatures this afternoon, topping out at 19 degrees here in Seoul and Chuncheon, Gwangju, Gyeongju, Jeju, getting up to 21 degrees under sunny skies nationwide. Then we have a rain in the forecast on Saturday from the southern regions, which will spread nationwide on Sunday. And that rain will bring a colder breeze, waking up to another very chilly morning next Monday.
Now that's all we have for this morning. Arirang News will be back at noon Korea time. Thanks for watching.